You're listening to Bold Calling, a podcast presented by Orem, where every episode we're bringing on the biggest and brightest names in the tech and sales industries for a discussion about their biggest challenges and the unique ways they're working to solve them. I'm your host, Adam Sokol, and I'm joined today by Dee Acosta, Senior Director of Sales and Strategic Growth at Modigi. Dee, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Adam. Pumped. Been a big fan of yours, of course, of Orem's. And man, so many stories to share that eager to just get into it. But yeah, I'm Senior Director of Growth at Modigi. I'll share what we do at the end of the call, but lots on my plate, lots of experience to get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so because this is going to be one of the first few episodes, I'm sure people might be getting a little bit tired of hearing me, but I'm going to kind of run you guys through what we're going to do and where we're going to kind of travel along this conversational journey. We're going to start with Dee's background, and we'll talk about Modigi for a bit. Then we'll get into the things that stress him out and how he's working to resolve them. And then we'll have some fun. So first things first, Dee, kind of walk me through your career path. How did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah. So I'm going to try to do the abridged version. So I grew up in Florida. I moved up here, kind of a neat story. My apartment wasn't done being built. I said, hey, I'm going to live with my parents for 6 months, save up to get a car. It turned into better part of 23 years now. Waited tables through college. I was one of those people I had to work, college. I went to college for a lot of years, but it really wasn't my vibe, like it just wasn't. So my first job out of college, and I think this is the important one to note, was at Fidelity, making, nothing. There was a data entry job. So back then everything was green screens, like DOS looking, and you had to, there's only so much computing power. So you had to like churn the data every certain hours. And we were dealing with millions in 401k investments. So if you missed the churn one day and the market went up 10%, you were on the hook for 10% of that investment. And it was absolutely horrible. It was just like the worst job. Even back then you're like, why can't computers do this? And all of my colleagues were these overworked, wonderful ladies, but overworked ladies in, their 50s who needed knee jobs. And, they were moving the team to North Carolina, and it was just miserable. And I remember thinking, getting in the office at 6 and you're like, why did I go to college? I went to college for this. But at the same time, a girl I was dating started working at a company called By Appointment Only. And it was cold calling, pure cold calling, appointment setting. Great company. They're still around. I have friends there. And she got me a job there. And quickly it became like life-changing, right? You were dealing with cooler people, funner job. You were making more money. It was just like the hours were better. It was just transformational. And then Great Recession happened. I went to Forrester for a little bit. I was at Aberdeen for 11 years. I had the pleasure recently of working at Metadata. I was head of revenue at Hockey Stack. And now I'm at Modigi, which is great. But, it's weird. Like sales, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and we're like, and I think back to that first job and I'm like, man, I was just as stressed out of that first job and I was absolutely miserable. So, is it sales or is it just human nature?
It's funny. I feel like we've had, before we started recording, we were sort of talking about our backgrounds. I feel like we have somewhat similar paths in the sense that when I graduated college, my very, very first job out of college was I worked at New York Life selling life insurance and looking at the kind of investment side of things. The reason I did that is my father owned a State Farm insurance agency for the entirety of my childhood. He's retired now, but when you graduate from college, you're like, I don't want to work for dad. I'm a fully formed adult 21-year-old. I can do this myself. So I went to New York Life where it was 100% commission based. And I realized all I was doing was calling on the people that I knew that in reality should be going to my father, who had at that time quite literally 3 decades more experience selling insurance. So after about 5-6 months, my dad was like, this is silly. Just come work in my office. You'll do the same thing. But you mentioned the green screen of data. Like that is exactly what I can visualize that to this day. Cause that was where all his book of business, that was where all of our information, all of our, what I now would just call call notes, all of that was in this green DOS, just horrible to look at computer. And it was it wasn't exactly cold calling because, my dad was very good at relationship building, which is important in sales. And so I would call these people, and whether or not they wanted to buy life insurance, and very few people ever do, they'd be like, Adam, I appreciate it, but I love your dad. I'm not interested, but he's a great guy. And like, so I never got too many of those harsh, like, lose this number and don't talk to me. But I know exactly that initial feeling. So what, kind of talk to me about, what, for people who are unfamiliar, what Modigi does and kind of how you're leading the team over there.
I'll get there, but I want to take a step back. So my dad is a programmer, very good programmer, great career. He was laid off for a year and he tried selling insurance. Like you said, he was horrible at it. But, I was in college and he was like, Daedric, that's my full name. He'd be like, Daedric, you got to get into sales. You'd be so good at it. You're just like these guys who are successful. And, the irony. And so he comes here and he'll take care of the kiddo. And, he has stuff that he does here, hobbies and property here. And remember he heard a cold call. It wasn't a very good cold call. And he was like, Daedric, I'm so proud of you because he knew how hard it was. I think that's the proudest he's ever. He's always been proud of me for other reasons. So what do I do? Modigi's a startup. Like, our companies work, Orem, we both support cold calling at the end of the day, right? Like, and right now cold calling is hot. Right, Adam, like do you feel that? Do you feel like cold calling is hot? Like I see it.
Yeah, I started at Orem in November of 2022. Had to think about what year it was right now. So I've been here, I guess, a year and a half at this point. And even at that point, when I started, it was Thanksgiving week was my first week. And I remember talking to my boss, Ting Ting, and our CEO, Jason Dorfman, had this presentation to everybody. And it was talking about getting Orem over the chasm from like a nice to have to a need to have.
Yeah.
And before I was here, I was at a very, very large corporation. And before then I was at a fairly large corporation. And I just remember thinking like, that is a years long thing to get over that chasm. Like, why are we talking about this? When in reality, just in my time here, it has gone from like, even at the end of 2022, people being like, yeah, I mean, we cold call a bit, but we're really more email focused, we're social selling. And now like it's I guess a tribute to our marketing team and our salespeople. Like people know and recognize what Orem is and all of the kind of AI dialing platforms, honestly, to give a nod to our competitors as well. They've set their game up too. Like people really are realizing like, oh no, if you're willing to pick up the phone and dial, it is the most direct way to build pipeline and to establish relationships. So this is a long rambling way of saying like, yeah, I absolutely have seen people are fully on board with the fact that if you pick up the phone, results are going to follow.
I'm giving you a virtual air hug because I like respect that so much, and I'm seeing it too. And I think that's what, when I have a hard day, that's what gets me, a little excited. So we are a startup. So what I do, I do a little bit of everything. I create content. I make a lot of cold calls. I had 2 days yesterday where I had multiple meetings set. I don't set the strategy, but I help influence the strategy and I close deals. So, with a startup, it's just so much that you have to take on. Like, man, I creating content, I have a LinkedIn Live and, I've created playbooks, and then you're also cold calling, and then, you're navigating deals, from the very transactional, sub 20K deal to the very strategic, we have to map out, 100K plus deal with big companies. So it is a lot, but candidly, I love it. Like, gosh, what I was, a big GTM company, what I do well, looking at the same 100 accounts, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a very high bias to action. I think we both do. Like you definitely do. I've known you digitally for a while, Adam. And like you see something stupid, you just can't take it. So quick story. So I worked at Aberdeen for 11 years. We were acquired by a company. I'm not going to name names, but it was so archaic. And I would bring up these problems and they would just get ignored because nobody wanted to deal with them. And even stuff like we had like 3 project management solutions. I pointed that out and, we eventually got down to 1. But but that business unit has collapsed. And, I was like, I told you guys, I told you. Um, so, I do it all. And we support cold calling. We work really well with Orem. As a matter of fact, we have a lot of mutual customers. I know a lot of your sales team, and Orem is so powerful, but it loves data. So we work really well together. We provide GTM data, specifically mobile numbers. Yeah, it's kind of cool that we're talking, and I'm rambling, but one of your salespeople were actually meeting to like strategize a deal together.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. Because you're absolutely right. Like, there's so many things you just mentioned that I want to kind of chime in on. One, also, Orem, we're getting more and more well known, which is wonderful, but we are still also technically a startup. We're not a massive company. And so, especially from a marketing standpoint, much like you said, like I know that there are benefits to different size companies, and I'm sure people listening to this are coming from all different size companies. Like I said, I worked for a corporation before this where there were 300 marketers, like just marketing had 300 people, which is an insane thing. And so there's so much, obviously part of that, what came with that is like basically an endless budget. So we could do whatever we wanted to. Literally one of the last things they did before I left was made like an Office/Parks and Rec style YouTube series with professional actors and professional videos and all these different things. And I'm just thinking about whatever the amount that cost was probably more than the budget I have for the year. But at the same time, to your point, I love the flexibility of like, we're recording a podcast right now. I'm working on finalizing an AI report after we get off the phone. I'm setting up some, different LinkedIn stuff we're doing. Like, I love kind of bouncing all around. But to get back to your point about, cold calling loves data, like you're absolutely right. I think that is one of the things that I love so much about what you guys are doing is, anytime we here at Orem are talking to prospects, whether it's through top of funnel content that I'm doing, through sales enablement, through the actual, conversations with executives when it's time for procurement and everything, all anyone wants to know is data. They want to know, what's your connect rate? What is your, bridge to connect time? What is, they want to know all these things. And without an organization and a tool like Modigi, it makes it really challenging. It doesn't matter if you're using Orem's power dialer or a parallel dialer and saying, well, I've made 500 phone calls this afternoon. Like, that's great, but you need the right numbers. You need to be able to
analytics.
Exactly. Yeah. You need all the analytics. With all the different things that you're doing and the deals that you're closing, small and large, and doing, like you said, you're doing content, you're doing enablement, you're doing all these different things. What is the thing that keeps you up at night? What is the work-related stuff that is stressing you out? Or if it's not stressing you out, what is the most challenging aspect of your role?
Oh, goodness. Everything. So there's different kind of people, they're motivated by the positive, right? Well, I'm neurotic, man. I'm motivated by the negative. What worries me now, deal cycles are longer. I think that's no secret. We're all dealing with substantially longer deal cycles. No one wants to scrutiny, right? That's what it is. We're also, and this was Chris Orla posted it, we're in a demand neutral environment. Like, there is no demand. People are cutting tech stack. They went crazy post-COVID, right, Adam? Like, post-COVID, they're like, we need to do something, right? And there was so much demand, you could just run LinkedIn ads and fill a pipeline. The biggest one for me right now is driving pipeline. So we have great advisors. We have great network. We have a tool that people need. Like, the value is so linear. We work with great companies like Orem. It's like, how do we turn that into pipeline? Because I want to see, multiple discovery calls a day, right? I want to see that because we can support that. And I've been with hypergrowth companies. I was at Metadata and Hockey Stack when they were going like this. I doubled Hockey Stack's customer count, and I know we can get there, right? And our value is so linear. But it's like, how do we take those steps? How do we get there? And our founders are phenomenal, right? They're excellent. They understand. They're open to growing. They listen to our advisors. But that bias to action is like, we can get here. Let's get here, right? So like our website's been a challenge, right? And it's not a knock to anyone, but I look at we use Orem's. I was like, look what Orem's doing, right? And User Gems Trinity is amazing. I'm like, look what they're doing. We just got to like do 90% of what they're doing, and we'll be good. And the other thing is we're both connected in the startup community, and I look at companies that are winning, right? And I really cherish that. And Orum's winning. User Gems is winning. I saw Cord beat their numbers. And it's so easy to say, well, the market's hard or sales is hard. But when I look at those winning companies, it really inspires me. Like Novatic. Like, are you familiar with Novatic? Do you know Natalie at all?
I don't know Natalie. I'm familiar with the organization though, but for people who are listening, and if you want to talk about it, please go ahead.
So Natalie is amazing, right? Very unassuming, incredible marketer, gets both the data side and human motivation. And they were lean there, right? They're not a big company. I don't think they raised anything more than like a seed round or small Series A, and they blew away their numbers. And how do they blow away their numbers? It's just good messaging, good sales and marketing alignment. Their head of sales, Ben, is exceptional. And just getting out there. And the vendor releases their top spend report. They don't have a category for Orum. I'm like, where's the Orum category? I'm going to add their CEO, who's a great guy, to add y'all. But they were number one, and they were number one against companies who were like 10 times as big. And Natalie, hear this, congratulations. But companies are winning. You can do it. There's a blueprint to winning, and we know what that looks like. Orum obviously knows what that looks like.
Yeah, I first off, thank you. I really appreciate it. We actually, when I first started here was when we were just starting our website redesign, which now we're very proud of it. And we use it to do some things. We do like various takeovers and stuff when we have campaigns going on. And to your point, like the way that we look at brand, we're very fortunate that our demand gen director, Sarah, who people have seen, she's gone viral a bunch of times on LinkedIn the past couple of months. She's one of those people who just,
your marketing team, I stand. Like everything they write, like you too, everything like, what did Adam say? And then Colin as well. I love Colin.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have like these very bright minds, and thank you for including me in there. But Sarah's one of these people who like she never really posted on LinkedIn until like this year, and now everything she does is like just gets hundreds and hundreds of people commenting. But she is a huge believer in brand is demand. She believes that we can create demand gen through our brand. And we're fortunate that our leadership, you mentioned Colin and I mentioned Jason earlier, our leaders basically, and my boss, Ting Ting, our VP of marketing, they basically tell us like, they know I'm a very creative person. They know Sarah's a very creative person. And they say like, okay, what do you guys got? Go crazy. And so earlier this year, we created this Sell Yeah campaign, which is now sort of been all over LinkedIn. I basically came up with this idea. I was like, I see negativity in sales all the time. It's
all
constant. Yeah, everyone just wants to, rag on their jobs and post these memes about people not showing up to their meetings. And I was like, let's focus on the positivity. And we talked about before I started recording. Anyone can go on my LinkedIn and see I talk about mental health all the time. I'm not shy about it. And I was like, I want to focus. Thank you. And I was like, I want to talk about the positivity. And so I came up with I was like, let's just say sell yeah, like hell yeah, like you get to sell. And I jokingly told Sarah, our demand gen director, I was like, really the impetus for this is I want a bright orange sweatshirt that says sell yeah. And she's like, well, we'll get there. And lo and behold, we have created these bright orange sweatshirts that anytime we post a photo of them as Orum, people are like, let me get one of those. But to your point, it's like, we do a lot here, but we're a small team. Like you said, we're a startup. And so for me, it's all about triaging. It's like, okay, what can we control? Yeah. And from a marketing standpoint, what we can control is we can have a voice and tone out in the market that's like, we're positive. We use AI to make sales more human. We want to keep the seller involved in the process because we understand that while decision makers, VPs, people of your level are ultimately making the decision to purchase Orum, the users are managers and sales reps. And so we want to be able to talk to everybody. And so this is a very long rambling way of saying our triage was, okay, we can focus on our messaging and we have people on our marketing team that are able to do something very uniquely well that others can't. Like my superpower is writing, our marketing, our events manager superpower is experiences. Like we know we can do these things. And so for you, thinking about, like you said, building pipeline was ultimately the thing that stresses you out the most. Like, how are you guys triaging to understand how to accomplish that? I know you're a big believer in all bound, but like, what's the way that you are triaging it to say, here's how we can win most effectively?
So I want to compliment you all because cold calling technically, usually has a negative connotation. And I think you all have kind of made it fun, which is hard, right? Especially when you're selling a big ticket enterprise item. I'm going to be candid. We're still getting to our messaging, right? We don't really scale with tiny companies, like a small startup. But what I've been pushing is, so we have a great advisor and incredible RevOps operator, his track record. Like I just can't say enough good things about the guy. He shared a story and he's like, someone was killing their numbers. He came to me and he said, I asked him, like, how are you doing it? He's like, oh, did you? They have mobile numbers. And I think a lot about, the challenger sale where, things are brought to executives, right? And that's how they really say, we need to get this for our team. So right now, we're trying to continue the top level through our co-founders and our advisors, but trying to build out a little bit more of that human nature. So I host my own podcast. We're trying to drive questions about, hey, what was life like growing up? How did you get into sales? Not just like tactically, okay, do this. And there's a lot of agenda items. And, I will say that idea of making sales fun, is something that I'm probably going to grab a little bit, right? Making sales fun, and shout out to User Gems, hey, pipeline anxiety, goodbye. But it's challenging. We're getting there. We're making updates to the website. My CEO is incredible, Ken Hoppy. He started posting and he's enjoying it. And he's like, I have a friend that helps them, they don't write for him. They don't ghostwrite, but they help. And I'm like, so, trying to get that out there, make us more accessible and less of, kind of a early 2000s, XVP flavor. But it's tough. It takes time, brand doesn't happen overnight. Right. And, I'm even sure with Orem, like you came on and there was customers that had a bad experience, or there was, people who said, hey, you're much more than parallel dialing, but say, hey, parallel dialing is bad. Those are some of the things we're doing. So I did sell to marketers for 15 years. I've worked with very good marketers. I've seen hypergrowth, so I am able to crib some of those things. Shout out to Mark Huber, the entire metadata team. They were fantastic when I worked with them. I'm like, you guys are so good. That's another thing. Sales, if you work with a good marketer who's brilliant, just let them run and ask them for help. Don't tell them what to do, because if they're getting results and they're brilliant, like your team, like I would work with you, I'd be like, hey, how's that report coming? Can I get some stats? I wouldn't be like, the report has to say this, so that's kind of my theory on that relationship.
That's something, we mentioned Colin and Ting Ting a few times now, our VP of sales and our VP of marketing. I will say the collaboration between our sales and marketing team here is really, really dynamic. Actually, last year at SaaStr, I wrote a speech for Ting Ting and Colin about our sales and marketing collaboration, and they presented that at SaaStr, and it was just great to see, because it wasn't just like window dressing. It wasn't just them saying the words that I was like, okay, make people believe that we actually get along. Like we do. I connect with our top sales reps every single week. Everything I write. Aaron Milner is one of our account executives who works in enterprise. Oh, yeah. And anytime I write a piece that we want to be, whether it's a blog post or a report or like sales enablement piece, I send it to him and I'm like, okay, would an enterprise person actually care about this from a sales standpoint? Please be honest, because I'm just a marketer. And like that stuff, it works back and forth. Then, because you establish these relationships with salespeople, now when they're sending something to a prospect, they'll come to me and be like, hey, can you help me tweak this message so that it actually is like fun and playful, or is, serious in tone? And you're absolutely right. Like that partnership, I always talk about de-siloing our teams here. Yes. Like my goal is to be so positive and effusive and talkative in Slack or in person when we have the ability to do that, is so that people are like, oh, I can come to Adam for anything. He's not going to say he's too busy, and vice versa. I want to, I've gotten so much FaceTime with all these people now. Like I know I can go to our CEO or I can go to Colin and be like, I need you to record something for 2 minutes. I know it's exhausting to do and you have a million other things, but we've built that kind of like that trust, just like you do in sales. We've built that trust to say like, okay, let's help one another. So yeah, I totally hear you. And it is so vital to strengthen those relationships between marketing and sales for sure.
The marketing is more than just leads. If you let marketing run, they will create pipeline. And in the interim, there's so many things that you can do with marketing to create your own pipeline, bolster sales, understand the market, just understand the way people think. It's just so valuable. So yeah, we're working on that. We are a smaller team. I know so many great marketers. Like I often look at LinkedIn. I'm like, man, if I had to build a marketing department, I could build like just people who are on the market. I could build like the greatest marketing department ever. But we are getting there. Yeah. I can add you to that list, Adam. Be like, hey, look what I'm doing in 2 years. No,
listen, throw me on that all-star team. Listen, I that's actually my favorite thing about LinkedIn is like connecting and interacting with people who, for every comment people see on LinkedIn about like you commenting on my post or me commenting on a person's post at a different company, that they don't see all the DMs that we all send each other. Like, oh my God, I love what you're doing. Yeah. Like that's the stuff where like, that's the good stuff where then you get to go to a conference or you see each other and you're like, just kind of noodle on stuff. That's how future teams listen. We're all fluid. It's people come and go. That's okay.
Dude, I love complimenting people, like sending them a DM and, hey, that was a great post, or, hey, I love the way you think, or like your marketing campaign. Like I've done that with Sarah, like her posts. I'm like, hey, your posts are so good. I just want you to know. And I think for marketers too, because like, sales, we have our number, right? Like I like positive feedback. Like there's not enough in sales. Like, good job, like that was a hard deal. So, give sales kudos, but I think marketers too, like maybe they don't hear that enough, and they go to the board meetings and it's just like, what do the numbers look like? And, you can say, hey, this is really good. This is really helpful. And then, getting back to cold calling, it all helps cold calling. I remember in metadata, Danny Reed, great seller, by the way. If you want to connect with someone, Danny Reed's awesome. But he said, hey man, I remember when people would pick up the phone and know who we were, and it's just transformational. You see a lot of cold calling advice and they're like, hey, I'm from Gong. Want to schedule 20 minutes? And it's like, dude, that's so different than 90% of the market. Like if OpenAI called me, I'd take a meeting. I'd be like, oh, OpenAI. Yeah, sure. I can't buy anything, but yeah.
Yeah. I always, I love going in Cleveland where I live. They have the Content Marketing Institute was founded. And so for a long time,
that's right. CMI. I've been to 3 of them.
Yeah. So the founder, Joe Palizzi, I've interviewed him a bunch of times, actually. He's a wonderful guy. And for a long time, they would do Content Marketing World, which is their big conference here in Cleveland. And now they kind of take it on the road, which is smart for them. But to your point about like someone making a cold call from like being like, hey, I'm from Gong, let's talk. They always do these presentations at Content Marketing World where it's like, so we've brought in the brightest minds from Target and McDonald's and Nike to talk about their marketing strategy. And I'm like, that's great. Their budget is a infinity number, like it's an infinity sign. It's such like different. So I always try to find the tracks at those places where it's like, we've got startups or we have mid-market organizations where I'm like, okay, you have a budget. Talk to me about creativity, as opposed to some executive who is very smart, but coming on and they're like, so we brought in Kevin Hart to do a commercial for us. And I'm like, great. I wonder if Kevin Hart will make a cold call for a couple $100. So let's see what we can do.
Dude, I love practical advice. But I remember as a Content Marketing Institute, it was a keynote and they talked about content piece of the year. And it was a good piece, by Informatica, shout out to them. But it was basically like how we did it, playbooks, right? I'm like, it was just another PDF. And I'm like, that's what's winning. That's it. Like in, Content Marketing Institute, like some of the sessions weren't that great. I'm going to be, no offense to Joe. I know he had a lot to handle. But Cleveland was great though. That's why I've been to Cleveland like 4 times, and every year would get nicer. It was during like 2014, 15, 16, 17. Every year would get nicer. I also have a funny story. So love the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like they would have a party there. And I would go into the store and shoplift shot glasses just to be stupid. So I have like all these shot glasses from there. But there's a great pic. I'll send it to you if you want to put it with the with Tupac. I'm in my like gingham shirt doing the West Side with Tupac because I love gangster rap, late '90s gangster rap, and a lot of fond memories of Content Marketing Institute. Like not just the sessions were okay, but like the people in Cleveland. But yeah, I think now like sales, marketing, CS. There's talk about there's a lot of bad CROs that only focus on sales, but really they're so aligned. Like CS, who likes us? Who can refer us? Who's moving? Marketing. What are you hearing on the market? What's resonating well? Sales. What are customers saying? And really at a startup, like that's what you have to do. You have to listen to each other's calls. You have to like ask, how's it going? You have to use tools like whether it's Gong, Align. Like we all have Riverside subscriptions.
Okay, let's transition. Not that we haven't been having fun, but let's transition to a little bit more fun, a little bit lighthearted questions. So the third segment of the podcast is just some kind of somewhat rapid fire fun questions that I love asking everybody. So the first one is, what was your very first job? It could be when you were a kid or when you were a teenager. What was your first job?
So my family business, they grow plants for landscaping, and I worked for my grandfather, and I was horrible at it. I barely did any work. Maybe I did more work than I thought, but I think about it in retrospect and I'm like, man, I was an entitled punk. But that family business has supported most of my family. So maybe I'm not the most entitled. That was the first. And then my first like corporate job was at Fidelity, which as I shared was horrible.
Yeah. Seeing as how my fiance and I just spent hundreds of dollars on more hostas, I feel like we might have to have a second conversation about plants after this. But
Dude, their business, like a $10 million business, been around since I was born. It's incredible, and they live in Florida, so like the demand is every new development needs all these plants. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
What was the worst job you've ever had? And it very well may be landscaping and stuff like that. But what was the worst job you've ever had?
The Fidelity job was bad. When Aberdeen was acquired was bad, but the worst job. So I waited tables through college, and I briefly waited tables at this like Italian trattoria. The head chef thought he was Gordon Ramsay, and the owners were just so like pretentious that it was like, what am I doing here? Like, this is not, and meanwhile, this is like in the Boston suburbs, like not even a fancy suburb. You're like, why are we so pretentious? Like we're serving broccoli rabe. Like what is going on? And I left as soon as I could. But so yeah, this is probably the three worst. So that one, Fidelity is probably the worst. And then when we were acquired, it was like, you go from working for a couple hundred people company to a $2 billion conglomerate. You're like, what's the priorities here?
Yeah. What is, do you have a favorite app for productivity, like a favorite tool that you use during the workday that kind of helps maximize what you can do?
Yeah. So I'm old. I live by my calendar. I did sign up for a Monday.com subscription. So shout out to Katie Ray. She's an incredible marketer. She uses, not Avoma, I forget the other Monday.com's competitor. And like, I remember seeing her Kanban board. It was just like the most beautiful productivity chart ever. And since then I've been like, I want to be like that one day. But I don't know. I've been at this so long, like my calendar, I'm really good at scheduling stuff, and little hacks. So like desk hermits like me that are like scared to, if I go for a walk, I'm not going to be productive. I will schedule like chores. So I'll be like, okay, let me spend 30 minutes to vacuum or like fold some laundry. And that way I get away from my desk and feel, because I'm at my desk from 8:30 to 6, literally, to feel productive. But yeah, my calendar, man, is like block colors, schedule, etc. Another hack is if you have an Apple Watch, all work notifications, turn them the email too, turn them all off, because that is the most. I had a Pebble watch when they first came out, and it was literally like, and I was ready to throw it away. So yeah, turn off Slack here, everything you can. Just have it be like text and like your favorite news and fitness apps.
I love that. I have a Garmin watch I'm a distance runner, and I do not get notifications on it because I can't. I'm just like, this is my running watch. This isn't a work watch. It is exclusively for that. So yeah, I totally.
I love my CEO. His picture, he's a big sports fan. His daughter goes to Buffalo. University of Colorado, Boulder. And it's funny, like I'll be on a call and you'll see like his little Coach Prime picture pop up because that's the one thing I don't block. And you're like, oh shoot. You got to like really put it into perspective. But yeah, it's powerful.
What is your favorite app for fun? Are you do you hop on TikTok? Do you use the YouTube app? Or do you have a game that you like to play? Is there something on your phone that you just use for pure enjoyment?
Oh man. So yeah, there are like, I've been in a Reddit recently. I'm a big Formula One fan, so Formula Dank, but I'm really big on outdoor hobbies. So I ski a lot. I paddleboard, I play paintball, I shoot archery. Actually did archery and paintball last weekend. I there's nothing better to me than like getting in a canoe or a hike and, having a couple beers, and just enjoying yourself. And, the archery is competitive. So we do what's called 3D. I don't hunt, but we do 3D archery where you shoot foam targets at different distances. And it's challenging. But that's really, I'm a desk hermit, and then the weekend, like I want to get out of the house. And as a parent, like I have a tween daughter and she's like, no, I want to stay home. I want to crochet or, I want to play with friends. And you're like, okay, we could do that. But, yeah, the phone can be deadly. Like, the news is so bad always, like it's always been bad. So you're like, I couldn't imagine in like the 60s and 80s, like you're like, oh, nuclear war, civil rights riot, nuclear war.
It'd be horrible. Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. What is, you mentioned
I do want to recommend an app. It's called WeCroak. So they do studies where if they remind you that you're going to die.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Like, yeah, I'm trying to remember the name, but WeCroak. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. You mentioned, we both talked about a little bit earlier how working for startups, we do a lot of different things. You mentioned being a desk hermit. So what's your ideal work day? Like what's if you could build out a perfect work day, what would it look like?
Man, 6 discovery call dash demos. That's not realistic. So, make 10 cold calls before 9, right? Get into some discovery calls, spend 30 minutes creating content, close a deal. That would be the best. But it is a startup. So who knows what we get tasked with.
Yeah. And then, all right, last question for you. What is a cold call opener that would get you to at least hear someone give you a pitch? Maybe not take the meeting, but what's a cold call opener that would actually get you to be like, okay, give me the rest of this?
Oh man. So the context is always important, but it's hard to find. So, if someone reached out to me and was like, hey, no one better do this. Hey, I heard you're struggling with pipeline, want to develop it organically. We have a really innovative way to do it. That would work. But if there is no context, let's be real. Sometimes there's no context. Like you can read financial statements and I go look at ads. I looked at LinkedIn ads because that's always kind of a good tell. There's just, what's the context? Like, hey, I see you want to sell into John Deere, like that's going to be the content. We're like, yeah. But I think, humor and self-deprecation off the bar. So like someone called me and they're really confident and they say, hey, Dee, this is a sales call, but I promise your day will be better for it. I'd be like, yeah, let's go into it. If someone calls relaxed and they have that. So I want to give some, shout out to Haley Brodeur and Sarah Plowman. I think people know them. Like they really like emphasize that. Like, they're like, hey, if we could help you. And then, you've got the goats like Morgan Ingram, who like, how are you not going to take a call from that? The guy's voice is pure energy. He's just like a lightning bolt. So, kindness, self-deprecation, that goes a long way. And those are the calls that I've taken, candidly. That doesn't mean that I bought from them, but those are the calls that I've taken.
No, I love that. I totally agree. It's when people just express and like kind of remind me, like it's a human being calling another human being. I'm like, okay, yeah, I will absolutely hear you out for sure.
My cold call persona is Matthew McConaughey. I want to be like Matthew McConaughey at the Texas game. Hey, how you doing? Good. How about that? People say not to talk about weather. I'm like, if the weather's hot, if the weather's cold, if it's not like, how about that? I saw that heat wave in Texas. You staying cool? Like that'll get me. That's who I want to be on the phone. Talk slow, but yeah, it's that vibe. I think vibe. Someone jokes about vibe based marketing. Maybe it's Tim Davidson. I'm like, yeah, there's something to that.
Mm-hmm. Listen, we joke here at Orem that's our entire brand. Every new brand campaign we release, the theme of it is just vibes. So I totally get that. Yeah.
Isn't it true though? Like, it's like, we know this content's, so I love empirical content, right? But if it has a good vibe, it goes along. Like, Devin Reed was the progenitor of that. I feel like vibe-based content that has a lot of good data on it. And then we see that with you all, and Peter Walker is great. Chanberg from Hockey Stack is doing that as well.
Yeah, love it. Okay, Dee. So I'll put everything in the show notes. But for people listening, where can they find you? Where can they follow along? You mentioned having a podcast. How can they get more information about you and Modigi and everything you guys are doing?
Yeah, thank you. So LinkedIn, just Dee Acosta. There's a link to the podcast that I host there. You're welcome to go to our website, modigi.com. But I'm not even going to give a spiel. Like, we all live by our mobile devices. Companies aren't investing in desk phones. They're just not. They're this e-waste. They're expensive too. Like a Plantronic phone, and then a data for it is really expensive. Plantronic doesn't even exist anymore. Oh man! So we provide mobile numbers. It's transformational. Like, I got like 10 connects on Friday. Set 3 meetings. We've seen it with our customers. They're typically doubling call revenue, and it's just a very cost-effective way to make sure you're engaging. And we work really well with parallel dialers, because with parallel dialers you can get to all those mobile numbers. And the best, there's some great tools out there, but the best way to make a rep better is just get them practice and confidence, and get that hang up over, get that meeting set. So that's us. Yeah, modigi.com and Dee Acosta. But that's it. Yeah, I'm pretty vocal, so I'm pretty easy to find.
Listen, that's how we, like you said, we've been kind of digitally connected for a while, but I literally just shot Dee a DM on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, we're launching this podcast. I'd love to have you on, and let's chat. So I can attest, Dee will respond to you. He will be active on there.
And so, when I started in sales, it was white knuckle. It was everybody looking out for themselves. And I think with the pandemic and younger generations coming on, it's been more like, hey, we need to collaborate. And you see this with partnerships, but you see this with like your rep that I reached out to. I'm like, hey, we're working on a deal together. Let's trade notes. It does make a difference. So don't be an island. You can hate your competitor, but don't be an island,
I love that so much. This has been fantastic. Dee, I really, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Awesome. This has been a great way to start the day. Thanks, Adam.